Yeah, there we go.
I'm refreshing the page now. I'm on your Chip Talks podcast page.
And we should be up and live.
There we go. We are live, and I just got it shared. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everybody to another exciting version of Chip Talks podcast. We're welcoming back Coach Brianna again today of Sculpt by Bree. So she's here today. She's got a downstream of clients that she coaches, and really women who have all manner, let's say, of things that they're working on. But we wanted to do these special broadcasts to really help her downstream clients and also just drive out some questions and things that her group and she has about the endocannabinoid system. So welcome back, Bree. We're excited to have you today.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be back. And as I was sharing earlier, please excuse me if I sound a little congested today. I don't typically get sick, but between our last talk and today, came down with a bit of a cold and flu. But thankfully, it was right after our last talk introducing our master regulatory system. So I had the fresh knowledge to take care of my foundations, making sure I've been getting the omega-3 fatty acids to support my immune system, getting that sunshine to support my immune system. And I'm excited for today's talk as we learn more about practical tips on how to use our master regulatory system for our wellness journeys. So really excited for today's talk.
Yeah, no, we might talk about some, health and flu tips, since you're right in the middle of that. So that's an easy thing to do. And I had a question for you. As we sort of get into details today, I'm really interested in, because I'm trying to do this too. I'm trying to talk to people about weight loss. And and I'm really more focusing on people who, let's say, obviously need to lose weight. So I want to kind of have a message for them, but I'm kind of forgetting about people who have eating disorders and things like that. And, we talk a lot about like intermittent fasting, which is a good message for people who maybe need to lose some weight, but not such a good message for people who maybe have eating disorders. Can you talk just a little bit about, because you really helped me. I need to understand how to talk basically to women who, how do you kind of balance those things, I guess?
Yeah. The biggest message is that food is our friend to our body. We need it to function on a cellular level. When it comes to diet culture and a lot of messages that we're hearing in the media, for example, with things like Ozempic being such a hot topic right now, it's being pushed by so many celebrities, it's glamorized, but really it's just a modern twist on the age-old starvation diet. And it gives the impression that women, or really just everyone, needs to be afraid of food to lose weight. We need to eat less and limit our body's intake on the vital nutrients that we need just to function. Especially as last week we were talking about nurturing the foundations of our master regulatory system. If we're not getting enough of those healthy fats, if we're not getting enough vitamin K, A, vitamin C, all the precious nutrients we need, our bodies aren't going to be able to function at a healthy level at all. Our brain performance is going to be hindered. Our energy will be lowered. And that's going to impact our workouts and our longevity overall. We could find ourselves more sick with more than just the cold or flu, having a weakened immune system because you're not nourishing your body well. So with diet culture, there's this pressure to eat less. But really what I want women to know is that we should be eating more in a way that supports our foundation, supports healthy metabolism. And once you're eating enough food, then you can start playing around with eating windows and time frames like that. Like how you mentioned last week that during certain times of the day, your body's going to be taking care more of its heart and healing different organs, which I'm very interested in learning more about. I think that's an important message for all of us to learn from. But that message would come second to making sure that you're just getting an adequate amount of nutrition. So not being afraid of food, but really leveraging food, that protein, the healthy fats, the complex carbs, in order to nourish yourselves well. Because once your body's functioning and firing well, then the weight loss will come. The higher performance, the higher energy will follow.
Yeah,
Do you
no,
have anything
that's excellent, excellent. Because when I talk about intermittent fasting, I'm not talking about denying your body, but people will hear it that way. And so so we always have to first of all consider we need to be properly nutriented. You can't function unless you're have proper nutrients. We're still beginning to learn. I mean, we know a lot about kind of what those proper nutrients are. And they're a little different, let's say, than what, we've been taught, kind of, because the importance of dietary fats is just king if you look at the endocannabinoid system, like you're saying. So that's kind of flies in the face of a lot of the, fad diets and all that. So I need to be more clear when I'm talking about this, about kind of what I'm really saying. So thank you. I appreciate that. And that really helps me. It changes my perspective a little bit on how maybe my words are being heard, and that's important. So, okay, well, do we want to do what we did last time and kind of throw it over to you and let you question me? I'm going to question you back on some of these, though. Get a little more out of you, because you gave a really good answer just then. That was really good. So.
Well, great. I'm excited to encourage your community as we talk about this topic of achieving your wellness goals naturally. And I want to bring this back to better understanding our master regulatory system, building off of what we talked about last week. So if you haven't listened to our conversation, part 1 of this 3-part series, make sure to go listen to that from last week. But my question starting off today is, how can understanding and supporting the master regulatory system aid in natural weight loss?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, so this is a big and vast topic. And so back to kind of what we were just talking about, this doesn't really apply just to weight loss. It applies to weight gain, and it kind of applies to weight management. So, we have to understand, let's say, the principles that I'm going to talk about before we can jack around with weight at all, because we've got to be nutriented and properly sated, let's say. So the endocannabinoid system, or this master regulatory system, regulates everything about us. And it regulates how much fat we'll store. So how much fat you store in your adipose tissue. It regulates how your nutrients are broken down. It regulates everything. Okay. So when we first eat a meal, and then we'll talk about how to influence it in a second, but when we first eat a meal, what happens is you sense 3 different enzymes kind of on your taste buds. And so you kind of have a sensor array for carbohydrates, for proteins, and for fats. Now, if you're eating fat, and again, it's endocannabinoid right off the bat on your tongue, if you're eating fat, what begins to happen is any of those things, you release different enzymes in your pancreas to deal with. Now, fat is the hardest thing, let's say, to deal with and requires the most work. But fats also, as we eat them, immediately build endocannabinoids. So fats are kind of the most important thing to our body. And the types of fats that we're eating, as they're building endocannabinoids in our intestinal lumen, send immediate feedback to our brain as to nutritional sufficiency. So nutritional sufficiency really isn't about aminos, about protein. It's really not about carbohydrates. It's about dietary fats. And so we'll keep eating. Let's say we won't feel sated until we have enough dietary fats. And if we're not getting the right kind of dietary fats, then what happens is our system will allow us to develop a microbiome. That microbiome will offset the fats that we're not getting. So the microbiome's purpose really is to offset nutritional deficiencies. Because we don't understand this very well right now, we have to have a whopping microbiome because we're so nutritionally deficient, meaning we're not eating the right kinds of fats. So the way that it works as to satiety, the way that it works as to I'm full or not, is a certain type of fat, and it's called monounsaturated fat. So when we eat, and it's in oleic acid, which is in olive oil, okay, but it's also in a lot of nuts and things. So anything with oleic acid will be a monounsaturated fat. And as soon as we eat that, we'll start building a satiety molecule that says, I'm full, stop eating. It should be as simple as, let's say, if we wanted to, I want to skip lunch, I don't want to feel hungry, I should be able to take a teaspoon of olive oil, and that should do it. But it doesn't right now. And so there's extenuating circumstances. And for some of us, it will do it, but for some of us, it won't. And if you're overweight, it likely won't, because you've got this kind of pathology associated with obesity. And that has more to do with your biome, your microbiome. So there's strategies to, fix that. And we've got a kind of a product called Fast where we go with that. That'd be kind of what Ozempic does, but in a very unsafe way. We go at this very safely because we're touching the endocannabinoid system and we're using this oleic acid, which builds the satiety molecule. That was a long answer, so sorry about that. But and we can use these dietary fats. Basically, if you're eating the right kinds of fats, your body will respond to that. You'll build the proper immune system, but you'll feel full if you're eating the right kinds of fats. If we're missing one, like omega-3s, we'll kind of eat and eat and eat until, we're looking for that omega-3. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So we need that healthy fat in order to feel satiated. And I'm happy to hear it's so important because fat tastes so good to me. I love eating nuts, that fatty fish, all the butter, so good. I love it all. Okay,
and just real quick, it's interesting too that if you like to eat a lot of sugar, and I'm sure a lot of people out there do, sugar is kind of comes from a fat craving that's kind of gone awry. And you might find that if you're craving sugar, oh, I really want a donut this morning, and you kind of take a handful of nuts, whoop, sometimes that'll get rid of that craving almost immediately.
So good. Really what I'm hearing is it's important to listen to your body's cravings. So if you crave that butter, maybe if you're having that dinner roll, don't feel guilty about adding butter or olive oil or dipping your bread in that olive oil mixed with some seasonings. Enjoy it. And then also listening to your body if you're having those sugar cravings, because maybe your body is trying to tell you, hey, give us some fats. We have those building blocks. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. I have a friend who says, I think she says, if you can't pick it, shoot it, or hit it with a rock, then you shouldn't eat it.
Okay.
So a donut is hard to shoot.
Okay. Yes. Well, okay. Even though those donuts, I do enjoy a nice little treat every now and then. But I guess that's the difference between nourishing your body versus nourishing your soul.
There you go.
Okay, well, what are some common misconceptions about weight loss that the MRS can clarify?
Oh, okay. Well, the biggest one we just talked about, like eating less will cause you to lose weight. So that's just wrong. Eating less calories, you can starve yourself and eventually you will lose weight. But your body is looking for certain things, right? So it's not really looking for a calorie counter. So you don't really have a thing in your body that says, oh, I've eaten 500 calories. I'm close to my 1,000. Oh, I've eaten 1,000. Oh, I've eaten 2,000. I'm good. I'm full. Doesn't work that way, right? So your body's looking for certain things. Your body's a big machine, right? So it's, it's a big fat machine first, and then it's kind of a protein machine under that. Then it's kind of a vitamin machine under that. But if you look at what a cell is trying to do, right? So a cell is trying to run itself. So it has to have, let's say, gasoline. That gasoline is, gasoline can be can be glucose for cells. but our cells are really built to run on dietary fat. So cells are looking for dietary fat. That's what they're looking for to run themselves. Your immune system is looking for dietary fat to build all the immune mediators you need. Then under that, really cells want to do work. So a cell wants to talk to his buddies, hey, here's an immune event I need to tell you guys about. And when they do that, they want to do that through protein. They want to make a protein and then send it out to other cells. They won't make that protein unless they have the amino acids in the extracellular matrix right around them to pull in to be able to make that protein. So, fat's super important. Cells don't run without fat, and cells don't run properly without fat. And then amino acids and protein kind of right under that. So we have to have those things. You can't run your body without fats and protein. Okay. So it's just, that basic. So we have to have those things, but you can use the so, if we know kind of what we need, there's a way to target in, let's say, a minimal amount of that need in order to build let's say a low calorie, perfect kind of manna, if you will. We're beginning to get close to doing that. So I could probably build you something like that now. I can definitely tell you what goes in that thing. But, so on the low calorie end, that's one thing. On the high calorie end, again, if someone's like trying to lose weight, the best thing to do is eat healthy, Don't deny yourself things, but just understand what healthy is. And again, understand kind of how your body works with that food. And, eating 2,000 calories in one meal is honestly better than eating 2,000 calories in 10 meals. Okay. It's easier on your body, and it's less work on your body, and it's kind of less work on your overall, let's say, endocannabinoid system and processing that food. So it's better to eat less deny yourself anything, so eat as much as you need to and want to, but eat less frequently. That's kind of the big thing in our system. If you want to gain weight, eat more frequently. I'll tell you a quick story about a bear. I probably told you this before, but a bear is a perfect example of kind of how you can manage your own weight. Bears are all big in the fall, and they do that on purpose. And bears are all lean in the spring and summer, and they do that on purpose. And the way they do that, they don't change how many calories they're eating. They don't really change the composition of their food, but they just change the window in which they eat those calories. So, a bear will eat in a 4-hour window all through spring and summer, will eat in a 12-hour window or more when it's trying to put on weight for the fall. So you can play those same games. Again, it's not about, eating less, it's about frequency. So.
Okay, got it. I do have a clarification question when it comes to the MRS and weight loss. You mentioned it's better to eat one big meal all at once. My concern that pops up with that are two things. One, how does that affect things like blood sugar and avoiding energy crashes? And also nutrient absorption, because I've been under the impression it's better to eat 3 meals throughout the day in moderate sizes, so your body's best able to absorb all of the nutrition. So how does that come into play?
Yeah, no, good questions, and really good questions. So as to, let's say, blood sugar and sufficiency, and this is kind of gets complicated, but I'll walk you through this as best I can. But first of all, we can go 40 days without eating. Okay, so all of us can. Now, again, I know you have people who have struggled with, kind of eating and eating disorders. So don't do that. I mean, eat a proper meal and all that, but just informationally, you can go 40 days without eating. And so the things that we feel like, let's say if we skip a meal or go through a day without eating, like the crashes and all that, those are 100% glucose related. Okay. So they're glucose related. So if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, if your main meal, and again, what should we eat? We need to eat a little bit of carbohydrate, but fat. So if your main meal is carbohydrates, so if you're mainly eating carbohydrates, you're eating a lot of sugar. and your body is kind of addicted, let's say, to that quick energy. And sugar's real quick energy, right? So when we start our muscles, sugar, but then they switch to fat, and fat is kind of our long range and long-term burning. So if we're eating a lot of carbohydrates and that's our main meal, if you begin to like all cram them all into one meal, you are going to have a little bit of a crash. But that's just getting your body through that and beginning to change kind of the composition of what you eat. So if you begin to eat fats in that one meal, then you'll not have so much of a crash. And again, if a tablespoon of olive oil, if you're trying to do this and you're crashing, tablespoon of olive oil, best thing in the world, it will pick you right back up. But you will work through that crash. Like right now I eat in a 4-hour window every day. So I fast for 20 hours a day and eat in a 4-hour window. I haven't eaten since, let's say, 7 o'clock last night. I have ample energy. I'm not hungry. I feel good. I don't have any kind of crash. But I did, when I first started playing around with these principles. Now, the second thing is digestive. Okay. So you will, there's very little, this is hard to kind of believe, but there's very little difference in kind of what happens mechanically to your body if I give you 50 calories versus 2,000 calories. Okay. Your body still has to go through the same work, meaning that you taste stuff, you're releasing enzymes from your pancreas, you've got to work on whatever that stuff is, you've got to work it through, and it all moves through your system in a certain way. 5 hours, doesn't matter if it's 50 calories or 2,000 calories. So you're going to absorb readily, what you need to over the course of those 5 hours. That's kind of why you have a 5-hour processing time. But in that 5 hours, you're kind of in a degraded state. And you're in a degraded state as to immune, as to, brain, as to athletic performance, as to almost everything. And so, the reason for this is we want you in what we call a fasted state, which is what happens 5 hours after you eat, rather than a fed state, which is what happens when you eat for 5 hours after. So you're just you're more energetic, you're stronger, you have a bigger immune system, you can heal faster, burn calories better, however you want to look at it, but we're way more in that fasted state. So, and again, this is still new, it's tip of the spear stuff, really. But, in my mind, I want to be in that state as much and as long as possible. I don't want to be in this, what happens to me when we eat and for 5 hours after we eat. Now, if you have an eating disorder, don't use that against me. Do not use that. I'll come find you.
So, if you're from a place of being sick, where maybe you do have an eating disorder, take it slowly, feed yourself throughout the day, start with those smaller meals. But ultimately, what you're saying is the benefits of being in your fed state versus that rest and digest state, where you're able to repair your body on a cellular level. Where your energy is being used for repairing your body versus digesting food. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. It basically, when we eat, we go into this special state and it's very difficult to deal with food. So that's what we do. It takes 5 hours. After we've done it, we deal with everything else. So we kind of want ourselves to be dealing with everything else, most of the time, rather than kind of dealing with that food, because it's a lot of work on our body. So,
got it. And do we still? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, food's necessary. You got to eat your 2,000 calories every day. So we're just talking about kind of when you do that. And if you want to gain weight, again, gaining weight, space out those 2,000 calories into, 5 or 6 meals. But you want to do the exact opposite of what I'm saying. But if you're using these principles to gain weight, also understand that you are in a lesser state when you're doing that, and that you're going to be more susceptible to being infected by the flu, pathogens, COVID, anything, because you're in a kind of a lesser state, but you will gain weight. So,
got it. So everybody fasts overnight. We've talked about this a bit before about breakfast. It's in the name. We're breaking our fast. So how many hours do you recommend between dinner and breakfast time for the benefit of fasted state.
Okay, and again, this is still new, so we're still really learning a lot about this. But I'll tell you, your body as a machine has two optimal times when it can eat. It doesn't mean that you have to eat, right? So you can skip over these times, it's no big deal, but you have kind of two optimal windows of when we should eat. And how do we know this? It's you express CB1 neuroreceptors in your stomach during these times, and that's when you have the most surface area and control to deal with, the stuff that you're throwing in your stomach. So it's 3 to 4 to 5 hours after you wake up, and well, let's say 2 to 4 hours after you wake up, and then let's see, 9 hours after you wake up. So in a window, 3 hours and 9 hours about is when the windows are for us to eat. Okay. And that's very common to almost all mammals. And so if you're nocturnal, you're likely going to eat in kind of that earlier window. And if you're, diurnal or like we are, then you're going to eat in that later window. But you have two windows of opportunity, let's say, to eat. Now, if you eat, let's say, breakfast at 8 a.m. and then dinner at 8 p.m., it's almost the worst thing that you can do to yourself for the kind of fasting and fed principles, because again, you're going to go through kind of two times of when your body's in a degraded state. It looks like, and again, this is still new, but it looks like that, eating in a window. So let's say an 8-hour window. So if you felt like you needed to eat breakfast, and a lot of people do, a lot of people need to eat breakfast. They feel like they need that energy. So, eating at, let's say 9 a.m. and then 8 hours later at whatever, 5 p.m. But, that would be a good eating window for those type people. So starting eating at 9 and then stopping eating at 5 or something. But, choosing your eating window kind of around, your own preferences is a big deal. But again, if you do have an eating disorder, again, this is, just the perfect thing to get in your mind to feed your disorder. So don't go there. You have to get your nutrients. You have to get 2,000 calories into this, and they have to be 2,000 good, healthy calories. That's not what, we're not talking about that. You've got to have your 2,000 calories. So.
Yeah. So would you say having dinner time around 6 p.m. and breakfast around 7 or 8 a.m. the next day, or 9 a.m. the next day, would give us about that 12 to 15 hour fasting window?
So if and you always want, so even if we just sort of throw out the intermittent fasting and all that, we always want to eat in a 12-hour or less window. It's just, if you eat in more than a 12-hour window, you're going to gain weight. It'll be almost impossible for you to maintain, let's say, a weight, and you're just going to add fat to kind of your additional fat stores. So 12-hour or less. So let's say if you were eating breakfast at 7 or 8, then you would want to quit eating for the day by 7 or 8 p.m. So not anything after, 7 or 8 p.m. And the shorter you can kind of make that window, the better. So if you could push your breakfast to 9 and then stop eating by 5, that's kind of better. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Because that will give us more of that 2-hour fast.
Yeah. And so the fasting, really think about, or intermittent fasting. And again, it's not so much about weight loss. You can use it for weight loss, but it's more just about health. It's about your immune system and kind of shield. I like the concept of, I'm a Star Trek guy, so I like the concept of shields. So when we eat, and for 5 hours after we eat, blah, shields are down, right? So we want our maximum shield strength, the most amount of time. So the way that you do that is eating in a, let's say, 12-hour or less, but ideally 10-hour, 8-hour or less window. But you got to think about the first time I eat for the day. So if that's breakfast, I'm opening my window. And then I want to close my window, let's say 8 to 10 hours later, right? So if you're eating breakfast at 7 a.m., then what is that, noon? And, by 5 p.m., you want to have your last meal for the day. So 7 to 5 is an adequate, window. and we all think that this is a denial thing, and it's really not. You eat as much as you want, really, eat as much as you want, as long as you're in your window. That's kind of what we try to communicate and get across to people. But again, eat, make sure you are eating. This isn't about starving yourself. It's just about a little bit different behavior as to how we're consuming our nutrients. So that's more advantageous for our health.
To repair. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. No, this is all good.
Great. Yeah, I've been researching a little about how when we have that fasting window, your body starts to repair, replacing the cells in your stomach lining. And even I've heard a little bit about like stem cell regeneration. I know that's not really what we're talking about today, but I'm really interested in it. Is this related to that at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's you're a completely different being. Your cells are in a completely different configuration between when you're fed, and fed just means I've eaten or 5 hours after I've eaten. So that's a fed state, or fasted, and that just means I haven't eaten in 5 hours. So your cells are completely different. You have a master switch in cells called AMPK. So if you study your body or you study physiology, you've likely heard about AMPK, but AMPK is a switch we want to throw because it's super advantageous. But let's go through a few things. So when I'm in a fasted state, I am AMPK forward. So I'm burning fat, I'm beta oxidizing, I am aerobic, if you will. Okay, so I'm in a kind of an aerobic state where I'm using oxygen to fuel my cells. Super efficient. I'm about 20 times more efficient than I am when I'm over there in fed. I have 2 ways to kill cancer. I am repairing cells in this mode. I'm also initiating something called autophagy, which is a way to clean up cells. I'm Superman in this mode. I mean, I can do anything. I'm Superman in this mode, right? When I eat, wow, I'm not. Okay. I turn off both my ways to kill cancer. I turn off most of my immune system. I turn off my cellular repair. I turn off all these functions because I have to, because it takes a lot of work to digest that food, break it down, store it in adipose tissue. So I can kind of do this really well or this really well, and eating is what flips that switch. So.
Very cool. Exciting information. And this leads me to my next question. Can you explain what is bioresonance and thermal imaging? Like, what are these things and how do they help you identify underlying health issues?
Yeah. So good questions. And these are kind of tools that we use in our current practice. And we're looking, let's say, to expand what we're doing, franchise or kind of whatever you want to call it. But these are the tools that we're using in our current practice. But we need to, if let's say you come in and you have something going on with you, and again, you maybe have been diagnosed by the medical system, you might come in and say, oh, they've diagnosed me with cancer or autism or, whatever, any myriad of things. We don't care what they've diagnosed you with. Okay. So we're going to look at you in a completely different way. So we're going to look at you, and thermal imaging will look at your exterior. So it will see basically temperature differences on the outside of your skin. And if we have chronic inflammation, well, we definitely will have temperature differences, and that'll show up in all of our lymphatic areas. So under your arms and the crooks of your, arms, things like that, where we'll see a lot of heat. If you have cancer, we'll see a lot of heat, in those cancer areas. If you have inflammation, we'll see a lot of heat in the areas. If you have trauma, we'll see a lot of heat. If you have lack of blood flow, we'll see coolness. If you have neuropathy, we'll see coolness. So we can see a lot of stuff with a thermal imaging camera, but mainly what we see in people is, well, you're chronically inflamed. We don't know with what, we don't know what's causing the inflammation. We don't know the underlying cause. And so our bioresonance machine helps us informationally. It is not a diagnostic device. It cannot diagnose you. I am not a doctor, but informationally, it tells us or gives us a lot of information about the vibrational frequencies of things in your body, like bugs, like parasites. So it helps us identify the underlying cause of things. And when I say underlying cause, most people come in with a list of symptoms, and most people will discuss their problems as symptoms, right? So you'll hear somebody say, I have cancer, or I have rheumatoid arthritis, or I have diabetes, or I have obesity, or I have chronic inflammation, or I have IBS, or I have Crohn's, or I have whatever. Those are symptoms. Those are symptoms of something that's underlying those things. So something causes Crohn's disease, something causes chronic inflammation, something causes rheumatoid arthritis. So we're looking for the underlying causes of things, and the bioresonance helps us give at least indications or informational indications of what those might be. From there, then we can build a plan, right? If to kids, to, let's say, point you toward either pharma or natural products, or ways on your own that you can kill parasites like worms, is different than how you would kill bacteria. And so we kind of need these machines to help us develop a plan to really help you and help you get past stuff. But it's amazing. People recover from all manner of things that they, let's say, shouldn't recover from because of what we do. So stuff that, the doctors told them, oh, it's that way. It'll be oh, you have liver failure. Oh, you have chronic kidney disease. It'll always be that way. You're, screwed forever. It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not at all. You just got to find the cause. So that's what it helps us do, is find the cause.
Wow, very hopeful. Okay, so with a thermal imaging, this is a tool that replaces mammograms. Is that correct? So should women be getting thermal imaging like we would with our regular well woman checkup? How often should we be doing that? Yeah. Is it a replacement totally?
It is a full-on replacement, and in fact, it is a non-invasive replacement. So all you ladies out there, God love you, who've been through mammograms, that's a horrible experience. And this is again, you have to remove your clothing, but that's all you have to do. We just take a picture of you. Now, with the thermal imaging, I'll say that, and I'm trained and certified, to read thermal images, but when you're reading a thermal image, it's almost a line that you have to draw that, do I tell this person about this thing that might be so precancerous that it doesn't even matter, or not, right? So it's that early of a detection. I can see any kind of heat increase, let's say in breast tissue, as soon as it happens. And so cancer is obvious on the thermal imaging. It just stands out like a huge thing. But we can begin to see when someone is like, maybe on the edge. And so we can advise and say, hey, it's, playtime's over. It's time to change your diet. It's time to do a whole bunch of other things because you're, looking like you're on the way to breast cancer. So we can do that, which is, better than a mammogram. The other thing about a mammogram that, again, this is still somewhat new, but cancer will encapsulate. So it'll form I forget what they call it, but an encapsulation, let's say, shell. And mammograms will, kind of disrupt that cell, and you likely have potential for, metastasis if you actually have a cancer, in breast tissue that you're evaluating. So there's some danger, let's say, in mammograms that, isn't there with a thermal imaging camera. The thermal imaging camera is just like taking a picture, a normal picture. So it's very non-threatening, non-invasive, no radiation.
Yeah, that's incredible. I hear a lot of buzz around potential dangers of mammograms. I wasn't totally sure how safe they are because that's the standard with our medical doctors. And I don't understand why we're not doing more with thermal imaging. So is this technology? Do you see this becoming more mainstream? Are you trying to get the word out about thermal imaging?
Yeah, we absolutely are. And we do thermal imaging in our clinic here. So I'm a certified thermographer. But thermal imaging is, so like most physicians, if you go, let's say you go talk to a middle-aged doctor, 40-year-old doctor, and say, doc, what about thermal imaging? He goes, oh, technology's not good enough. Well, no, doc, it wasn't 20 years ago when you went through medical school, but gosh, have camera phones gotten better in the last 20 years? Certainly thermal imaging cameras have. And so we've gone from a 150 by 150 pixel situation that was maybe good enough to maybe detect, breast cancer, to a, 1024 by 768 pixel situation that's, I can see a baby inside of you with my camera, which is, pretty detailed information. So the technology's gotten way better and the medical system really hasn't caught up. The other thing is you have to kind of, the way the medical system works, it's a business, right? And again, I'm not going to get rid of my billion-dollar mammogram infrastructure for these very cheap and inexpensive thermal imaging cameras because, we got insurance and everybody's all involved in that whole loop and all that. Now I got something new, right? So it's just, it's coming. It's going to be, the election here in the United States is just a huge deal. It really is. If you want change in health, then vote for change, because you'll get it with RFK Jr. coming along. But if you listen to what he's saying, again, these new technologies will be brought in, they'll become a part of the system. We have to break that old entrenched system. And by break, meaning, have you demand more out of it, have me demand more out of it, have us really demand change in that system. And, mammograms and PET scans and MRIs are useful tools, but there's a lot of other new tools that are also super useful and super good and super efficacious. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Visit you about once a year in Edmond to get thermal imaging.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So definitely, and about, once a year is about right. If you're on kind of the proper bioresonance thing, it's probably about every 6 months. If you've got something going on, it's probably about every 2 months. So like right now we have a lady who is going through in vitro fertilization. It turns out that your eggs stick to your uterus based on endocannabinoid expression. So the more CB1 receptors you have expressed in your uterus, the better chance you will have of sticking and fertilizing an egg. The other thing that impacts fertilization is pathogens. If you have a high bacterial load or a high pathogen load, then you're a lot less likely to become fertilized. And so we can use this machine to measure and monitor. So we've got a lady who's going through IVF, which is very expensive, but she's measuring and monitoring herself to make sure that she doesn't get super pathogenic, and make sure that her endocannabinoid system is kind of properly aligned. And we'll see how that works out. I mean, she hasn't been successful yet. And so she's trying kind of new things to see if we can improve her likelihood of success. So.
Right. So using the MRS system to support hormonal health.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. The other thing about hormonal health, since we were talking a little bit about kind of this fasting and fed, all hormones come from cholesterol, right? So if you're, my testosterone comes from cholesterol, your estrogen comes from, cholesterol. So all hormones come from cholesterol. Now, when I've eaten and in this fed state for 5 hours after I've just eaten, I'm making cholesterol. Okay. So that's important. We need to make cholesterol. 40% of our brain is cholesterol. So cholesterol is super important. And cholesterol is where all hormones come from. So I need to make it. So when I eat, I'm making it. Bam, bam, bam for 5 hours after. And then 5 hours after I eat, I start breaking it down. Okay. If you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're never breaking down your cholesterol. You might a little bit at night, but that's it. So if someone's having a hormone issue or hormone deficiency or hormone imbalance or dysregulation and wants to kind of go the natural route, again, it's super important to allow your body to break down that cholesterol. And in order to do that, you have to be 5 hours past that last meal. So.
Okay, awesome information. And this next question ties into something you started talking about a little bit earlier with parasites and bacterial infection. How does detecting bacterial or parasitic infections or inflammation impact one's ability to not only lose weight, but to maintain general health?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, it's kind of the secret to health, let's say. So the big secret that I'm never going to tell you, because it doesn't support my business model, is you get infected with stuff and it makes you sick. Okay. If I don't test you for that, again, you never know it. You don't get any feedback on these infections other than, oh, my kidney's failing or whatever, right? And so, it's in some people's best interest to never test you for this and never tell you about this. And sadly, that appears to be what happens. But let me kind of walk you through what happens. So let's take hookworm and pinworm. So hookworm and pinworm infects 70–80% of us. It's the same thing that infects our dogs, our cats, our horses, our pigs, our sheep. We know to deworm our horses, our pigs, our cows, and our sheep. We do it every 6 months, but we don't deworm ourselves, and we should. But anyway, here's what happens. So a hookworm and pinworm will infect us, and they like to get in the gut first. One guy will beat our immune system. That's so hard to do. Even if you're in a fed state all the time, it's really hard to do. But one guy will beat our immune system, and he has to rewire a bunch of stuff. He's got to rewire stuff. He's got to block stuff. He's got to do a whole lot of work. He's got to be pretty sophisticated to beat our immune system. But once he does, guess what he starts doing? Reproducing. And so he begins to grow. His little colony begins to grow. And as he grows, your immune system is your immune system is aware of every cell inside of you that is not you. Okay. You tag your own cells with stuff. And again, if it's not you, it's not tagged, you start fighting it. So your immune system starts fighting this infection right off. Where it's pulling resources from, so where it's getting the stuff to fight with, is the same place that you build blood and lymph resources. So they come from bone. So stem cells and bone. So your stem cells express in bone. You have a certain amount of stem cells at any given time. And if you've got an infection, a lot of those stem cells are going over here to fight the infection. So what happens is you start getting way more turnover in your bone than you should, and you start getting some osteoporosis. So osteoporosis is one of the first things that happens in a big infection because you're trying to fight it and you're using resources that you can't replenish. The next thing that happens is all that stuff has to move around in blood. So your blood pressure goes up. So if you have high blood pressure, that's a strong indication that you have some kind of infection. It's just that easy. So again, God is a perfect engineer. He doesn't make you to break. He makes you to heal. Everything in you is trying to heal all the time. So if blood pressure is high, there's a reason for it, and it's usually infection. Now, all that blood has to be filtered, right? So all that blood with all the immune mediators and all the dead bodies and all that stuff has to be filtered, and it gets filtered by the kidneys. The kidneys can filter a lot of blood and do it really well, but they begin to get tired if it's got a bunch of crap in it. And they begin to show, they can give up. They'll say, I think I'll give you diabetes now, type 2, boom. They'll start doing all kinds of things to say that they're giving up. And they'll fail, in a worst case. So people don't really die of renal failure. They die of an infection that causes their kidneys to fail. And then lastly, it's easy to move water through a tube. It's harder to move syrup through a tube. And so as your heart is trying to pump this thick, gooey blood, it gets tired, it gets inflamed, it starts to have some damage. So again, you don't die of kidney failure. You die of exactly what I just said. You don't die of a heart attack. You die of exactly what I just said. You die of a 30-year hookworm and pinworm infection, or H. pylori, or staph, or whatever. And your physician never tests you for it. So this is something that we think is, this is core and germane and fundamental to your health. And so we've got ways to test you for it. We also do, you can tell a lot from a blood test. It's really interesting to see what physicians do not read from blood tests now. But, you can tell if you're infected and with what and how bad, usually from a blood test. So.
Okay. So parasites, I feel like since we live in America, parasites just sound like something that's going to happen from the old countries. We wear tennis shoes most of the time. We're cooking our pork. Where are these parasites coming from? How likely is it that we have them? How often should we be getting tested?
Great question. Okay, so this goes back to our initial discussion on fasting and fed. So it's funny how all things revolve around kind of that little or big switch. We all think of ourselves as boy in the bubble, right? So we're in this bubble. We got this big immune system around us. Something works its way through our immune system and we're going to get it. So if it's COVID or influenza or whatever, we're done. We're going to catch it. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way at all. You have an immune system that goes up and down all the time. Goes down when you eat for 5 hours, comes up after you eat, stays up in a strong way until you eat again. So you kind of are constantly doing this. So you're constantly in a state where you can get infected, okay? And we get infected with all manner of stuff. It's just a question of if that stuff has the horsepower to beat our immune system. Okay. And so if we're doing things to take care of our immune system, if we're sort of playing this fasting and fed game, if we're eating right, if we're bolstering our immune system, then we're not going to have much problem. We're not going to get sick with a lot of stuff. It's going to take a real strong bug, to be able to kind of hook us and infect us. So we'll just fight off much stuff. If we're eating all the time, and I mean not eating too many calories, I'm eating more frequent. If you're a breakfast, lunch, and dinner person, again, you're going to be a lot more susceptible to being infected than somebody like me. If you're not eating right, you're going to be way more susceptible to being infected than someone like me. So there's all of these, and that's mainly what we're trying to teach and preach is understand your immune system, defend yourself. I can't help you if you won't defend yourself. You got to defend yourself. So that's when we talk about these things, fasting and fed and eating right and eating more omega-3s and understanding your immune system. It's really all about trying to teach you how to defend yourself from these pathogens that are the cause of most disease. So.
Got it. So we defend ourselves. Are there any practical tips like making sure you're cooking your food all the way through, not walking barefoot? Like, what are some basic things we can do?
No, you can. It's almost impossible to not get infected with hookworm and pinworm. So you'll read about hookworm and pinworm, and it's from dog defecant, and you're walking around in bare feet or something and getting it. Most of these things, you get the mental impression that we have to roll around in the sewer in order to get. That's not the case. And I'll give you an example of this because this is how it works. So we all have seen that dead thing by the side of the road, right? And we'll drive by it. It'll be a full-blown raccoon. And then, 2 days later, we'll drive by it. It'll be kind of a half raccoon. And then 2 days later, it'll sort of just decay and decompose there on the road, right? And that's the way this earth works. If something isn't alive, if it's not moving enough electrons, if it doesn't have enough VEEV, it's going to get infected and this earth will try to decompose it. Okay? That's exactly the war that we're fighting inside of us all the time. These bugs want to infect us, get inside of us, and decompose us. The fact that you're alive and have an immune system fights them off. But we're right on the verge of that raccoon dead thing on this side of the road. And there's constantly bacteria and things that want to degrade us to mush and eat us, right? So, that's just kind of the way the world works. Your immune system is your defense. It's your shield and your sword against those things decomposing you, right now. So.
Okay. So we're constantly exposed to these things. And we just want to make sure they don't get out of control. Okay.
Well, it's more, we're constantly exposed to these things, but with this shield. So we got this shield, right? So, and we can control the shield. So we can control when the shield is up and we can control the strength of the shield. We control if the shield is up or down by our eating behavior. We control the strength of the shield by what we eat. So we have a lot of control, but it's just not it's not the way that we think, like put on a mask or, wear shoes or things like that. It's more our own behavior and kind of how we're treating this vehicle with our eating behavior and our nutrient behavior. So
yeah, so taking care of our immune system. How often should we be getting tested for parasites?
At least I would say every 6 months. Hook round and pinworm will infect us, and they can get pretty active within 6 months and begin to cause some damage. If you've had some more severe things, like let's say you've had hepatitis or H. pylori or some of the cancer causing guys, maybe a little bit more frequently, maybe every 3 months. Eventually this testing, it costs. We don't charge that much to do it. There's bioresonance providers all around some are good and some are horrible. We don't really charge that much to do it. So we try not to make it a hardship for people to get tested. But if you've got something like cancer situations, things like that are dynamic and changing, or if you're trying to make changes, then it's good to get tested just to see progress. The nice thing about bioresonance is it quantifies things. So I get a number. So like if I'm seeing, let's say you have hook round and pinworm, I'm getting a number associated with that, and we could test you again, let's say in 3 weeks, and make sure that number is trending in the right way that we want to see it. So we've got a way to kind of quantify what we're doing, which is helpful. And you can do the same thing with thermal imaging. I can show you if your chronic inflammation is going up or down. So it's a way to, a lot of this natural, let's say, product stuff and the stuff that we're talking about has been pretty woohoo, and you've had a lot of people honestly deceive people with it. To try to, I'll, find the sick and vulnerable people, and then I'll tell them what they want to hear, and I'll give them some placebo or something, and, they'll get better. So it's what we do has kind of gotten a bad rap, but it's becoming more professional, and it's super important for me, at least. I want to measure. So I want to be able to measure and show you, whether you're getting better or not. You may not want to see that, but I've got that. I can see whether you're getting better or not. So we try to do that with everything that we do here. We want to quantify, we want the data, we want to, prove it. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, I will make visiting you next summer when I'm back in Oklahoma top of my list of things to do. Okay, so can you share some success stories with some of your clients who have benefited from bioresonance, thermal imaging, and overall supporting their MRS?
Yeah, absolutely. So we get all kinds of weird, let's say, nonlinear things that happen. And so, you may just want to lose weight, or you may want to gain weight, you may have, trouble in just certain areas. So this is going to help no matter what, because we're identifying the cause. And so what the pharmaceutical system will treat symptoms. So if you come in and you've got your kidney markers are high, well, that's a symptom, and they're going to treat your kidneys with some drug. Again, we're going to look for the underlying cause of that, which is likely some infection. But I'll give you a good example. And this is kind of my favorite one because I think it's kind of dramatic. And this was a gentleman who came in. He was ex-special forces, military, very disciplined, professional, person. But I start talking to him and say, well, what's going on? He says, I have chronic and cyclic vomiting. He goes, and sometimes it's just so bad. It's just, it's so horrible. He said, when I was in the military, he said numerous times I wanted to commit suicide because it was so bad. Nothing that they would ever give me would help, with the situation. And I just didn't know what to do. So he gets out of the military. He's a Lifeline pilot now. So he flies life flight helicopters, right? So he's the pilot that's picking you up if you're in a car wreck or something like that. And so I said, well, what do you do now? I mean, you can't obviously start vomiting when you're flying. And, how are you kind of handling this situation? He goes, I have a THC vape pen. My THC vape pen will give me immediate relief. He goes, I've got to fly with it. I've got to, kind of, and again, if I get caught, I'm going to lose my job. If I get drug tested, I'm going to lose my job. But it's the only thing that gives me relief. So we hook him up to the bioresonance machine. And it turns out that he has hook round and pinworm, which a lot of us have. But hook round and pinworm, now, in order for you to vomit, you have to have serotonin impact your serotonin receptor for vomit called 5-HT3. So serotonin has to touch that guy, blah, you throw up. It doesn't matter who or what you are. If I touch serotonin to 5-HT3 the right way, you will throw up. So it turns out that these hookworm and pinworms that he had, that we identified on the bioresonance, will cause you to overexpress serotonin. So cause you to make more serotonin. And this is likely exactly what, we couldn't see exactly what was happening, but likely what was happening, that was hitting his 5-HT3 receptor and causing him to vomit. Now, it turns out the cannabis that he was using, the THC, blocks that receptor. So that was why he was getting immediate relief. Now, the cool thing is, it turns out ginger also blocks that receptor. So we were able to give him an alternative to the THC, but addressing the hookworm and pinworm got rid of the problem. And again, we have a hookworm and pinworm can be addressed by ivermectin, or it can be addressed by, we have a product in TrueMedics called deworm that we built to address hookworm and pinworm. But that's what he took. All better, good, flying, no problems, no longer hitting the vape pen, all good. So that's kind of the most dramatic one. But we have stories like that all the time. A lot of women suffer from chronic tiredness. I'll just tell you this, and I see this. It's a blood. It's really kind of not a disorder. It's just a blood infection in a lot of women that have this chronic tiredness syndrome. So we see a lot of that, and we help women a lot. Mood, kind of energy, and emotionality. A lot of this chronic tiredness will also kind of keep you from generating a lot of emotion. So you're still going to have emotion, but it's not going to be kind of at the level that you were before. So, low affect, low energy, and we treat a lot of that. But just cancer, autism, all manner of things we've dealt with and had success with. So,
got it. So, what are some alternative TrueMedics products that, if you don't want to take the THC, but you still want benefits, what are some products that aid in weight loss, pain relief, sleep, and focus that we can integrate into our daily wellness routines?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've really tried to specialize and focus in is, we realize that we specialize in the endocannabinoid system, and THC is a way to impact that, but that's federally illegal still here in the United States. In a lot of countries, it's illegal. So that's not the best formulation decision for us, because a lot of people can't use it and can't benefit from it. Now, interestingly and nicely, I hold a patent. So I hold an issued patent on being able to manipulate your endocannabinoid system with non-cannabis, non-marijuana things. And so, I've got a whole host of things that I can go to, which will kind of do what I'm wanting to do in the endocannabinoid system for different things. So we kind of pride ourselves on being able, let's say, to do what THC could do without any THC. So we try to stay away from THC. Now, if you're interested in THC, let's say you're a cannabis person and you want to understand how to use THC to help whatever's going on with you, we can help you do that because we know a lot about the system. But in our own formulation, we try to stay away from THC just because it's federally illegal, it's controversial, and it's not for everyone, and we realize that. So when we say endocannabinoid, a lot of people think that means we work exclusively with marijuana or cannabis somehow. The endocannabinoid system is 500 million years older than cannabis. So they really got nothing to do with each other. Cannabis is just a kind of a turmeric way to supplement the system. So yeah, to answer your question, we can do a lot. We can do anything we need to do without really any cannabis. We use CBDs and some cannabinoids just because they're safe and they kind of help things go better, and they're sexy. People understand them. Oh, you have CBD in that, it must work better. No, not really, but you think it does. So here you go. So we do that some.
Got it. So if we're looking on your website, what products should we be looking for that can aid in the weight loss, the pain relief, the sleep, and focus?
Yeah, so the products should be all somewhat logically, the logic may be a little twisted in your mind, but they should be somewhat logically laid out. So our weight loss product is called Fast, and so you can find the Fast tablets, and that is our weight loss offering. Our pain relief line is called Comfort. Our anti-inflammatory and kind of mood energy is called, Vitality. So we might, in a product line, let's say in the Comfort product line, we might have tablets, we might have tinctures, and we might have herbal shots. The herbal shots are kind of our strongest version of what we're doing. So like now in our let's say parasitic, our deworming products, we've got the tablet, the tincture, and now we have this shot, and the shot works really well. So it will kind of almost completely eradicate most of these pathogens within 2 weeks. The tablets and other things take a little bit longer, to do. But anyway, you can find, most of the stuff that we're talking about on our website. Just, omega-3 supplement is called omega-3 supplement. So they're pretty logically named for the most part.
Awesome. And you can use Sculpt by Bree for 10% off.
Absolutely. You use Sculpt by Bree and you'll get 10% off. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me, for sharing all about the parasites and things that we can do to keep healthy overall. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to remind your audience that if they're looking for healthy recipes that are balanced with that protein, that healthy fat, those complex carbs that are nutrient dense, then I do have my free fall faves e-mag with anti-inflammatory recipes to support your gut health and to just make sure you're nourishing your cells on the most foundational level. So just shoot me a message on Instagram at Sculpt by Bree, and I will get that to your audience.
And just to throw this in before we close, one of the main questions that we get asked all the time is, can you do recipes? Are there recipes? Are there, tell me, Chip, you're talking about fats and proteins and all that. Give me recipes. It's like, I'm talking to you about fats and proteins and what's important. Bree is who you need to talk to. So get in contact with Bree. She'll tell you what to eat, how to eat, what to do, how to do it. So, okay.
We'll make sure you're fed really well. It tastes real good.
There you go. All right, Bree. Well, this is a good place to leave it. And we'll be back next week, right, with another episode.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. We'll see you next Wednesday.
All right. See you next Wednesday.